Detective Bark was no ordinary dog. He was smart, he was brave, he was the best detective in town.
It was right here, Detective. I had just watered it this morning. Lucky was the most beautiful tulip, so red and vibrant. It stood out among all the flowers in my garden.
Mrs. Maple led Detective Bark to her garden, her face a mix of worry and determination. She had nurtured her garden for years, and Lucky was her pride and joy. She pointed at an empty spot in her flower bed, where Lucky once stood tall and proud. The absence of the tulip left a noticeable void. Detective Bark sniffed the ground carefully, his keen senses picking up every scent. He was known for his sharp nose and unparalleled detective skills. He circled the empty spot, his tail wagging thoughtfully. Each wag seemed to indicate he was piecing together the puzzle. He found a tiny red petal. This was a clue. The petal was fresh, suggesting the tulip had been taken recently. Detective Bark barked excitedly, ready to solve the mystery of the missing tulip. Mrs. Maple looked hopeful. S1. She knew if anyone could find Lucky, it was Detective Bark. The garden was vast with many nooks and crannies, but Detective Bark was undeterred. He had solved many cases before, from missing bones to lost toys, but this was his first floral mystery. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over the garden, but Detective Bark's determination shone brighter. He sniffed around the garden, following the trail of the red petal. Each step brought him closer to uncovering the truth. Mrs. Maple watched with bated breath, her heart pounding with anticipation. The garden, once a place of peace and beauty, now felt like a scene from a mystery novel. Detective Bark's ears perked up as he caught another scent. He followed it to the edge of the garden, where a small hole in the fence suggested an intruder. Could it be a mischievous squirrel, or perhaps a curious neighbor's cat? The plot thickened. Detective Bark's eyes gleamed with excitement. The case of the missing tulip was far from over, but with each clue, he was one step closer to bringing Lucky back home. Detective Bark's first stop was to see Nutty the squirrel.
Nutty, have you seen Mrs. Maple's tulip?
Tulip? Nope, haven't seen it. Too busy with these acorns. Delicious acorns.
Nutty was busy gathering acorns. He stopped and scratched his head. Detective Bark knew Nutty liked to play tricks, but Nutty wasn't a flower thief. Detective Bark thanked Nutty and continued his investigation. He had another suspect in mind. Mr. Whiskers, the grumpy cat, was lounging on the fence. His fur was slightly ruffled by the gentle breeze, and his eyes, half closed, seemed to be taking in every detail of the world around him. He watched the world go by, his gaze shifting from one end of the street to the other. The neighborhood was quiet, with only the occasional chirp of a bird or the rustle of leaves to break the silence. Mr. Whiskers always seemed to be watching. His eyes, sharp and alert, missed nothing. Every movement, every sound was noted and filed away in his feline mind.
Mr. Whiskers, did you happen to see what happened to Mrs. Maple's missing tulip? The question hung in the air, as if the very garden itself was waiting for an answer.
Can't say that I did. Too busy napping. Mr. Whiskers stretched lazily, his claws extending and retracting as he settled back into his comfortable position. Important cat business, you know. He closed his eyes as if to emphasize the importance of his nap over any missing flowers.
Detective Bark approached him cautiously. The detective, a seasoned canine with a nose for trouble, knew better than to underestimate Mr. Whiskers. Mr. Whiskers yawned, showing no interest in the case. His disinterest was almost palpable, a clear message that he had more pressing matters to attend to. Detective Bark wasn't sure if Mr. Whiskers knew something or not. The cat's aloof demeanor made it difficult to tell if he was hiding something or genuinely indifferent. He decided to keep looking for clues. The detective's eyes scanned the flower beds, the fences, and every nook and cranny of the garden, hoping to find a lead that would solve the mystery of the missing tulip. Detective Bark followed his nose. The faint scent of the missing tulip led him on a winding path. He sniffed along the garden wall, checked under the rose bushes, and even looked in the bird bath. Finally, the scent led him to the most unexpected place. It led him to Mrs. Periwinkle's tool shed. The scent was strong now. S1.
I knew I was close to solving the mystery. Aha! Narrator, Detective Bark poked his head inside the shed. I'm happy to find the tulip safe, narrator. There, in the middle of the floor, was the missing tulip. But it wasn't stolen. It had fallen into Mrs. Periwinkle's gardening basket. The basket had been left open. The wind must have blown the delicate flower right in.
Detective Bark raced back to Mrs. Periwinkle. He barked excitedly and led her to the shed. S1. Follow me. Mrs. Periwinkle was overjoyed to see her beloved Lucky. She carefully placed the tulip back in its spot in the garden. The mystery was solved. It wasn't a thief after all, just a gust of wind. S2. Oh my Lucky.
I've done it again!
News of Detective Bark's success spread through the neighborhood. Everyone gathered to celebrate. The air was filled with excitement and joy as animals from every corner of the neighborhood came together. They had all heard about Detective Bark's incredible bravery and cleverness in solving the latest mystery that had puzzled everyone for weeks.
Well done, Bark. You truly are the best detective we could ever ask for. Your sharp nose and keen instincts have once again saved the day.
Hooray for Bark! 3 cheers for our hero. Let's make this day unforgettable. We are so proud of you, Bark. Your dedication and hard work have brought peace and happiness back to our community.
Here's a special treat for our hero. You deserve every bit of it, Bark. Enjoy this delicious reward for all your efforts and for being the best detective around.
Mrs. Periwinkle baked a special dog biscuit just for Detective Bark. It was made with love and the finest ingredients, a true delicacy for our beloved detective. Bark savored every bite, knowing it was a token of appreciation from the entire neighborhood. Detective Bark, the hero of the day, wagged his tail, happy to have solved another mystery. His heart swelled with pride as he looked around at all the smiling faces. He knew that his efforts had made a real difference. It was a good day to be a detective dog. The sun was shining and the sense of accomplishment was palpable. Bark felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had once again protected his friends and neighbors. He knew there would be more mysteries to solve and he would be ready. With his trusty nose and unwavering determination, Detective Bark was always prepared for the next challenge. The neighborhood could rest easy knowing their hero was on the case.